Honorable Mlenzana. Honorable Mlenzana. I'm co-chairing with the Honorable Mahlangu. The two committees are decided to have this public hearing together. That is the Standing Committee and the Select Committee on Appropriations. So that's what we are dealing with today. Before we proceed, Lubabalo, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairperson. From the Select Committee on Appropriations, Chair, we only have one apology from
Lubabalo, just switch off your video. We've lost you. Please switch off your video. Lubabalo, please switch off your video. We can't hear you. Lubabalo, switch off your video. We can't hear you.
Yes, Chair.
We can't switch off your video. Can't hear you. Okay.
From my side, Chair, it is off from my side, Chair.
Okay, now it's off. Okay, then you can proceed.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, the only apology that we have received is from Honorable Dutoit, Chairperson. Thanks, Chair. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Darren from SCOA.
Good afternoon, co-chairpersons, honorable members and guests. We received apologies from Ms. Peters and Ms. Lonyana. Thank you.
Come again.
Ms. Peters and Ms. Lonyana.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Darren.
Chairperson?
Yes.
It's Honorable Matafa.
Please come in, Honorable Matafa.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to register my apology that by 4 o'clock, unfortunately, due to matters beyond my control, I have to exit the meeting. So I am in the meeting, but at 4 o'clock, I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay, that's fine. That's noted, Honorable Matafa.
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Chair.
Yes. Honorable Kaiso.
Yes. Honorable Dipuo has indicated that she's in a difficult position to can be connected well. So she has submitted that apology for in case we don't see her in the camera.
That's fine. Thank you. That's noted. So I think let's proceed with our meeting. Honorable members, as you know, we and let me greet everybody who might be on the platform, the support staff and members of the public, members of the media, and everybody who's on the platform. You are all welcome. As I said, this meeting is being co-chaired by myself and Honorable Mahlangu. But it's about the second special appropriation bill, right? That's the bill that we're dealing with. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act number 9/2009, enjoins these committees to have public engagements when we deal with these bills. So hence our meeting today. I don't know as I'll say fortunately or unfortunately, we are only having a COSATU today, whose COSATU will be appearing before us today. Comrade Matthew, you are welcome to the joint sitting of the committees. I would like to hear you, but I'm sure others obviously made some written submissions. But I think the fact that we don't have many people who wanted to come and appear before us today is because they agree with the bill. But would like them to come and even just to say that they agree with the bill. It shouldn't only be if they don't agree with the bill. So even to say, yes, we think the bill is doing the correct thing, the money is going to the right place, and so on and so forth, we'll still welcome them to appear before the committees. Honorable members, just to jog our memories, the second special appropriation bill proposed to allocate 32.85 billion rand. 26.7 billion rand of it will go to social development, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. If it proceeds, gets 1.3 billion rand. National Treasury gets 3.9 billion rand, mainly for SASRIA, and the Defense and Police get 700 million and 250 million rand respectively. So that's why we are meeting honorable members, and we really appreciate you being here on a Friday afternoon. It is a special intervention. Therefore, we'll do extraordinary things and meet to try and ensure that the people who have been affected by COVID-19 and the recent unrest in KZN and Gauteng receive necessary support. With those few words, I would ask COSATU to come in. Matthew?
Sure. Yeah, good afternoon, Comrade Chair, and yeah, afternoon to honorable members. Thanks, Comrade Chairperson, and to the co-chair, Comrade Karim, and other honorable members and colleagues. Thanks, Chair, for giving us space as COSATU just to share our submission. We did want to say, Comrade Chair, that we made a submission because we support the bill, and you're right, it's important also not just for us to come to Parliament to throw stones at government and to complain, but also when things are positively done, when there's good interventions by the state, we should also applaud that and defend that. And I think even to say, how can we improve upon it? How can we enhance it, make it a success? So I think that's our objective today, Comrade Chairperson. But yeah, I can go straight to our presentation, just share it quickly, Comrade Chair. Thanks very much, Chair. And I'll get straight to our presentation. I think, Chair, I want to say that we welcome the tabling of this second special appropriation bill. We believe, Comrade Chair, that it's a welcome intervention by government. It'll really provide badly needed relief to millions of the unemployed, to companies and to businesses which have suffered huge losses during the recent violence in KZN and Gauteng. And we also believe that it helps to restore law and order in these two provinces, which is the role of the Defence Force and the police. So as COSATU, we do support the bill, and we do urge Parliament to ensure its speedy passage into law. Chair, in the immediate aftermath of the violence in July, we had tabled a disaster relief proposal package as COSATU to government at NEDLAC. We understood the government would take care of the law and order issues and restore peace, but if for that in the immediate aftermath of the violence, we needed to help workers and communities, families and businesses to pick up the pieces and to get back to normal, so to speak. Chair, we think this package, and which was agreed to by government and NETLAC, we think this package holistically, not just these provisions, would really help to offset many of the damages caused by the violence. And, there's different figures about how much the damage might be. But, most of the figures have looked at about 50 billion rand. Some have looked at even higher. The job loss targets figures are a bit more difficult to quantify. Fortunately, so far, what we picked up from factories, from the retail sector, from the agricultural and transport sector, has been not as bad as we had feared. So that's a positive step. But obviously, there might be more longer-term damage to those provinces, to investment, etc. So, Chair, we had tabled this package as COSATU because we felt it's critical to have a social compact, a common understanding as government, labor, and business about what needs to be done to rebuild these two provinces. And of course, needless to say that these two provinces account for more than half of our population and half of the GDP. So no province will be untouched by the economic slump in these two provinces. So our proposals, Comrade Chair, which was included the Unemployment Insurance Fund, extending the TERS relief for companies, for workers who are affected by the violence, the reinstating of the COVID-19 350 grant across all provinces. It couldn't just be for these two provinces because you would then spark potential copycat violence in other provinces. The distribution of food parcels to destitute persons in the two provinces, the provision of private insurance and SARS insurance relief to those who lost property, and fiscal relief from government for the uninsured. We also engaged around bank relief for affected consumers, a revamped loan guarantee scheme, which I think the banks are working on a different version. Hopefully that can help contribute as well. I think we also had welcomed the tax relief proposals given to businesses. Chair, I think something also for members thought, as we get to the MTBPS in November and the budget in February, is about we felt there was a need to provide additional funds for the Presidential Employment Program, which has been quite successful. It's employed over 310,000 teaching assistants at the level of the minimum wage and above at the schools. It's eased pressure on the schools and the classrooms. They provided these young people with practical skills and experience and actually help them to find a permanent job. So we think that we should be looking at expanding that Presidential Employment Program to other unemployed persons and give them similar opportunities. The other proposals we had tabled was about limited access for distressed workers to the pension fund. So that's workers who have lost wages or highly indebted. We are making positive progress in this front. We're having good engagements with Treasury and ourselves as COSATU on it. I think we're finding consensus quite on most issues, and I think we will achieve full consensus in the next week or two. So there would be a bill we hope would be tabled at Parliament with the MTBPS to provide for some immediate relief next year for these workers, and probably next year a longer-term intervention package would also come into play as well in terms of legislation. So I think, Chair, we're quite pleased as COSATU that we got very positive responses from our colleagues in Treasury and Government, the Presidency and business, and that in essence our proposals were agreed to and are being rolled out to varying degrees now. So I think that for us was a very positive thing that we can all rally together in a moment of national crisis and focus on what needs to be done. But I think, Chair, we must also raise with the honourable members in terms of your oversight role to inform you that there are problems. First, we were quite disappointed as COSATU that, nearly 3 months after the violence, the Unemployment Insurance Fund's TERS has not paid a single cent to these workers. They've received about 8,000 applications. Not 1 cent has been paid yet, and there's continuous bureaucratic delays. We are trying to resolve that with the colleagues in the Department of Labour and UIF, but it is a concern. I think, Chair, we must welcome that SASSA has begun payments for the 350 grant. But I think, Chair, it's also deeply concerning that you still find long queues at the post offices of claimants waiting for it. So I think what I proposed on these two fronts, Comrade Chair, is that members, is that for government to intervene, to address the bureaucratic delays in the UIF, and I think also to ensure that SASSA moves to doing payments electronically. Chair, on the SASRIA 3.9 billion rand allocation, I think we want to support it as COSATU to make sure that SASRIA has got sufficient liquidity to meet all the claims. The two proposals we have in this regard is one that government should just ensure, and I'm sure they are monitoring on a daily basis, that this is sufficient to cover all legitimate claims. But of course, if needs be, there's a need for additional allocations, and we should provide for that in the medium-term budget statement at the beginning of February. Chair, I think for us, one of the most critical parts, the most progressive and impactful provisions in the bill is the 26.2 billion rand given to social grants, or to the 350 COVID-19 grant. We think its reinstatement is a very critical as a poverty alleviation intervention. But I think, Chair, I want to also say that when it comes to an end at the end of March 2022, a few months down the road, its recipients, the 8 million or so, will not find jobs on the 1st of April. I don't think we should create a situation where those unemployed persons who are really impoverished are then left on their own. Chair, I think we also want to hope that the 500 million rand allocated for administration to SASSA would be really used to modernize the systems, to move away from physical payments at the post offices, to make sure the systems are tightened up to prevent corruption and all payments are done electronically. We should not have to see these queues for people for days on end at the post office. Chair, proposal on this SASSA allocations is one is to make the 350 grant or the SRD grant permanent, to extend it beyond March 2022, and to see if we can increase it to the level of the food poverty line, which is now estimated by Stats SA to be about 624 rand. I think, Chair, we also would want to appeal to Parliament to ensure that SASSA does modernize its systems and the payments are moved to be done electronically. Chair, in terms of the Department of Defense, 700 million rand, I think we have to welcome the deployment of the Defence Force. We believe it played a critical role in restoring law and order. We don't agree with the people who have attacked the role of the Defence Force. In fact, it has really helped to protect communities, to protect workers, protect the economy, and we should applaud the good work they've done. But I think, Chair, we must raise concern about how the Defence Force has been weakened over the past decade in particular. The conditions and bases, the physical conditions, the material of the weapons, the machinery have really deteriorated to quite alarming levels. There's constant reports of significant levels of corruption, wasteful expenditure we see in the Defence Force all the time. We don't see much action around it. And we think also, Chair, we're in serious danger that many military personnel are being undertrained because of a shortage of funds. Chair, we must also state that it's quite alarming that we were informed by Treasury earlier this week that in fact the Defence Department is the single largest offender in terms of in the state, in terms of the late payment of suppliers. And that has a huge impact upon suppliers. But it's quite around the Defence Force, Department of Defence is really the biggest culprit in that regard. So we do feel that if these crises in the Defence Force are not dealt with, it will make future deployments of the Defence Force very difficult, whether in South Africa or even other parts of Africa. We feel there is a need for Parliament to engage with Treasury and the DoD on measures to address the systematic, what we fear is the systematic collapse of capacity within the Defence Force. You know, it's not easy to build a quality Defence Force. It takes many years, so easy to collapse it, but it's going to take us many years to rebuild it. Chairs, in terms of the South African Police Service, I think we do welcome the role that police officers played in restoring law and order under very difficult conditions. And it was a difficult situation for them. Do they err and lives are lost? Or do they go out to protect property, and how to get the right balance? In some areas they did well, but I think in other areas there were significant failings as well. But Chair, we do think there is a need for an investigation with regards to the failure of SAPS in many instances to respond timelessly and proactively when violence erupted. And this really is a command problem, not the ordinary SAPS member on the ground who did his level best against huge odds. But we must say that, Chair, the capacity of the police has really been weakened during the era of state capture. And you have a huge bloated management on top and insufficient capacity on the ground. Chair, in the 2020 State of the Nation address, the President committed to increasing the police headcount by 7,000. But in fact, the headcount has actually decreased by 7,000, and this is an alarming trend. It needs to be halted and to be reversed. So I propose in this regard, again, is for Parliament to engage with Treasury and SAPS on plans to address the systematic decapacitation of the police. Chair, in terms of the allocation of 1.3 billion rand to DTIC, I think we must welcome it. We do believe it's going to provide a critical relief for many companies and factories which have been affected by the violence. It's going to help to save jobs and to rebuild the capacity. But Chair, I think we are concerned, and we've raised it many times in our submissions to Parliament in the budget processes, about a continuous reduction in funding given to DTI, specifically around its industrial financing allocations. And this really has a huge impact upon the clothing industry, the manufacturing industry sectors, etc. And it has a real consequence on the ability of these companies to stay open and to save jobs, let alone to create jobs. So Chair, proposal in this regard is that we should be reversing these cuts to DTIC in the medium-term budget statement, as well as the budget in February and the medium-term budget policy framework as well. If all departments we need to champion and to protect, it really is DTI. And DTI really has a very, very small budget in the greater scheme of things, but its impact is huge and it's very positive. Chair, I think just to conclude, I think as COSATU we want to support this very progressive bill. I think we want to urge Parliament, and we are confident honourable members would do it, to pass it quite as soon as possible. I think we're quite pleased that the committees reconvened even during this recess to do these public hearings. We want to say as COSATU, we're very confident it's going to provide badly needed relief to millions of people who are unemployed, who have no source of income. It's going to provide positive relief to thousands of companies and factories, and it will help to save thousands of jobs and prevent company closures. But I do want to say also, Comrade Chair, is that this shouldn't be a one-stop process. We do need to have further engagements with government about how we're going to assist the Defence Force and the police to be adequately resourced to fill the constitutionally mandated roles. We do feel very critically, Honourable Chair, members, that there is need for further provisions in the MTBPS and the budget in February to make the SRD grant permanent, to increase it in line with the food poverty line from April next year. It is in essence, Comrade Chair, the platform, the stepping stone for a basic income grant, which I think most political parties have endorsed publicly, and most of society agrees is a necessity and is affordable, Chair, at this level. And I think lastly, Chair, is that we do feel that if there's one additional platform we can convince members to support is for further allocations to be given to DTIC to ensure it's adequately resourced to support the rebuilding of the industrial manufacturing sector of the economy and to help to grow the economy and to save jobs. So that's our presentation in a nutshell, Comrade Chair. Yeah, then let me stop there and thank you. Thanks, members, very much for giving us time to raise our submissions and say we support this bill and we look forward to its passage. Thanks very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Comrade Matthew, for the presentation. Oral members, here's the presentation. If you can just shout at me, I'll note your names down, those who would like to engage with the presentation. Oral members.
Mlenzana.
Honorable Mlenzana. Honorable members.
Honorable Ryder, Chair.
Honorable
Ryder.
Honorable Ryder. Okay, help me. Who else?
Peters.
Honorable Peters.
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso. Any other honorable member? Honorable members, I'm still there. Okay, I'll allow Honorable Mlenzana to start. If there's any other honorable members, secretaries will help me to identify them and recognize them. Honorable Mlenzana, please go.
No, thanks, Chairperson, and good afternoon, honorable members, colleagues, and Comrade Matthew. It's a cold, chilling afternoon, but then we are here, and let us welcome the presentation by COSATU. Chairperson, for the sake of interest, If Comrade Matthew can just share with.
Honorable Lenzana,
Yes.
You may switch
Yes.
off your
Can you hear me?
You may switch off your video. I'm struggling to hear you. Okay, try then.
How is it now?
Much better.
How am I now?
Much better.
Much better.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was just saying, Chairperson, if Comrade Smith can just share with us.
He got lost now.
I got lost once more.
No, we can hear you. I'm sure it's Honorable Peters. We can hear you. We can hear you very well.
Okay, you can hear me now, ne?
Yeah.
I was saying, if Comrade Matthew can share with us their understanding as COSATU on the conditions attached to the financial support to businesses. Then the last one, I don't want to talk more. One, Chairperson, I am passionate about would be what's happening with the informal traders. Can COSATU share with us on the financial support? Because one would need clarity around the financial support to affected informal traders. It's just that for me. Otherwise, I'm happy that COSATU joined us, not necessarily to oppose, but to tell us that they are supporting the bill. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Lenzana. Honorable Ryder, please come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Just on a lighter note, Honorable Lenzana, I'm pretty sure that informal traders don't pay union fees. So I'm not sure COSATU's got a position on them, but no. Chair, thank you. It's Friday afternoon, the day before registration weekend. I'm sure the fact that we're all here shows our commitment. I wanted to really just very shortly appreciate COSATU's presentation. I think we agree with a lot of it. There's a few obvious positions that we would not agree on. But I do want to emphasize the points made about the erosion of capacity within both the Defence Force and the police services over the past decade or so. And I want to emphasize that, and I also want to say to this committee, we're really going to need COSATU's assistance and support in dealing with this going forward, because I think there's going to be some changes that need to happen. But the fact that they're also highlighting this is most welcome. That's my input. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Peters.
Chairperson, may I request you, like Honorable Lenzana, I am in a very difficult corner here. I'm not, immediately I switch on, I'm going to be offline. So can I be allowed not to switch on the video? Please proceed, Honorable Peters. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, I want to thank COSATU and for the presentation. But more than anything else, I want to thank them for the consistency in dealing with some of the issues, especially if you look at the point with regard to the pension issue. But my concern, Comrade Matthew, or the COSATU presenter, is that it doesn't seem like COSATU is actively involved in lobbying the workers for publicly supporting the drive for this pension reform. Because in my view, this is something very progressive, especially if you look at the challenges most of the workers have with regard to debt, and especially debt with regard to property like houses and all that. And you'd know, Comrade Matthew, that you pay a house for more than 20 years, and at the end of that 20 years, they then end up applying for that bond So they live in that debt. By the time they go to the pension, they still don't own the property, although they might have lived in it for very many years. I know that there is a joke in the communities, Comrade Matthew, that the beneficiaries or those who will benefit if anything happens to the worker, like if he or she dies, they are not in support. But it's not about the beneficiaries. It's about the impact of debt on the worker as a present, relieving them of the stress, because some of them just pull their weight to go to work, not because they would have wanted to, but because they've got these debts. So I think it is important that we fully support you on this initiative. We are very happy with your engagements with National Treasury and the processes at NETLEC. But I am just concerned that it doesn't seem like the workers are aware actively on the ground, those in the COSATU affiliates and those who are not necessarily in the COSATU affiliates, that this is a very progressive intervention, especially with regard to challenges of dealing with personal stress related to debt. The other thing, Chairperson, I see COSATU is supporting this assistant teachers. That was a very good intervention. But I'm telling you, Chairperson, we are going to end up in a situation where, again, as this committee, we sit with challenges of those who have been doing this work, who have not been paid, who demand to be made permanent. And I think that the issue of the long-term need in schools, this thing has been debated even at the time I was still in school. The issue of school social workers, school sports, school teacher assistants. In the private schools, they do have those teacher assistants. And I want to make an example. My sister was a teacher assistant in the beginning in a school. And ultimately, as we speak, she's a qualified professional teacher with a remedial education and learners with a slow, remedial education and all those type of things, which means that these teacher assistants, they would then end up having the love and the interest and the passion for teaching, and then graduate, because it is important that people must have career pathing, they must have an interest, and they will then have the interest of the learners because they've seen them through as they come in. It should not just be about sanitizing. I'll make an example. In one of the schools in Mahareng, the principal told me that the teacher assistant who was attached to the school for the period after the schools reopened on the COVID-19 period last year, the principal said that young man is an asset. He repaired all the school's computers that were not working to an extent that the school now has computers, which means the school now has identified a skill in somebody that was not even there for that particular reason. So this category of workers is needed. As we speak, in the Northern Cape, there are those assistants who are not paid. And I am worried that this becomes a challenge that needs to be addressed by this committee, because it means the Department of Education needs to be supported. But I want to say, Chairperson, the important thing that I always pick up with regard to COSATU presentations is that they are well researched, they are well informed, they address the issues of the communities, they address the issues of the workers, they address the issues which are very key and critical. Honorable Ryder can speak about the traders, but those traders benefit from the workers who must have, and the community that must have access to resources. The issue of the 350 that COSATU is raising with regard to the post office, that is a serious concern that we always address as a committee. And I believe that we need to further engage the Department of Social Development and SALSA with regard to this issue of the post office. We need the post office, but the post office must be an institution that serves our people with dignity and restore their dignity. The people cannot be queuing. The people cannot be waiting for such a long time. Thank you, Chairperson. And once more, my apologies for not being able to switch on my my video.
Thank you, Honorable Peters, but we could hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for your input. Honorable Kaiso.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Kosatu, Comrade Parks, for supporting this this bill with the points that we have critically elevated during your presentation. Let me quickly jump to these points that have been raised by my colleagues. Of course, one agrees wholly. Honorable Ryder agreed partially, but I invite you to agree 100% with what Kosatu was actually saying. On the, Honorable Chair, we once, I think it is still something that is before the table, the issue of the caregivers, who are supposed to have been, absorbed, being an argument, which is still an argument which does not find its finality, in as far as the Department of Health is concerned. So I agree with Honorable Dipua that we shouldn't find ourselves now having to come back to such issues at the end of the day, that we see the same assistant teachers now at the end of the day. Even if you said, okay, this was created by COVID-19, but we're saying, okay, now it is actually, there are new opportunities which has now arisen since the advent of COVID-19 pandemic, which now include the existence or the necessity to have assistant teachers. But at the end of the day, I agree that there would be this expectation that now seeing that now, this has a temporary relief to unemployment, and actually progress in the education system. But it has also, on the other side, created an expectation that now people must be seen to be fully employed at the end of the day. So I don't know how in future is this. In other words, there has to be a planning that says, what should be done in the long term about this situation? Because we're talking about, there are new opportunities which have been created by the advent of COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, how are we going to respond on some of these? Because they are linked, for instance, to issue of unemployment or poverty and inequality. We had assistant pharmacies, we had, all these categories of assistant what. So, but at the end of the day, then we find that there are disputes which cannot be resolved as to what then should happen about this. Don't you think, Comrade Parks, that COSATU should engage broadly on this issue, that should be able to assist us, then what should happen? Because now it will be a condition that is going to exist, and then people would not want to be disappointed at the end of the day, given the economic circumstances that people find themselves. Now, on the issue of capacity of SAPS, or South African Police Service, which your assessment says it has been weakened, and because of number of reasons. I also want to hear what COSATU would propose for moving forward about this situation, so that we know or get some an input that seek to advise or do something about this situation. Yes, I agree, Honorable Chair, that, we talk about building our industry, and now this department, trade and industry, would play a very critical role in as far as also building the industry. And we have learned from the previous presentation by the department itself with regard to a number of manufacturing companies playing the role of building local manufacturing, sectors, and also, trying to make sure that there's a greater collaboration, including the private sector, in as far as bolstering our industries and get them investing, taking part. But that cannot happen out of any involvement or commitment to look at the budget holistically, to come to terms, in order to shape up that vision that the department is actually looking for, because that would directly affect or have impact in as far as job creation and so obviously looking forward in as far as the medium-term budget policy statement that is upcoming. I would agree with COSATU that there has to be a look into that, such that now our industries are being built and they're able to support the economy. So yes, otherwise, I just want to get from COSATU, Comrade Parks, as to, don't you think that
Kaiso, please switch off your video.
and KZN? Sorry, Honorable Chair.
I was saying you may switch off your video because we lost you.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah, the last point that you were making.
Okay. No, I was saying that I just wanted to get from Comrade Matthew about the issue of violence in Gauteng and KZN that took place. Where don't you think that perhaps there are other areas which might have been affected indirectly in as far as provision of products or working together by these different companies from KZN? Because I have learned in one province, in Free State Province, in areas such as Welcome, that there are companies who have begun to do short timing because of the situation of violence in KZN and Gauteng. I didn't hear you talking about that development. Because currently what we are referring to is only about Gauteng and KZN, whereas there are issues that are also related to the same in as far as other provinces are concerned. In particular, I'm referring to Free State, and in Welcome, where workers are being short, they are doing short time. So otherwise, I want to thank very much for COSATU for supporting the bill, Honorable Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Can I check with the other honorable members? Are there other honorable members who would like to still come in?
Honorable Njadu sent me an SMS chairperson indicating that he would like to have a bite.
Honorable Njadu, please come in.
Honorable Chairperson, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all members. Also, good afternoon to COSATU. Chairperson, I think one had to appreciate the support of COSATU for this bill. Also, with the view that this will be an economic turnaround, immediate and medium and long term. And then also I want to make the point on that is a valid point made by COSATU on the DTI, in terms that one will have to look in terms of future, how the department will be able to get more support. Then I only have one question. I'm in and out, Chairperson, so I may have missed the point. I don't know whether COSATU, just to take us into confidence around the COSATU's position now, latest on the wage bill. I may have been missed out, maybe if that was raised in the presentation, but I'm just throwing it in. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other oral member who would like to come in? Okay.
Honorable Karim, Chair.
Honorable Karim, please come in.
Chairperson, since the rainstorms yesterday and into today, we've been having lots of problems in this part of Msunduzi, so I can't put my video on. I don't have much to say, actually. In fact, I more or less feel obliged to say something merely for the sake of saying it. I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe because Matthew is my buddy, I don't know. But anyway, the first thing to say is that, I agree with you, Chairperson, that, stakeholders should also come to a hearing to say that they agree mostly with a bill or, a budget or whatever, or wholly or mostly or whatever, because that's also important. You don't just come if you're opposed to parts or whole of a bill or a budget or a policy paper. Secondly, I'm glad that this process has come out through NEDLAC. It's not often that NEDLAC, processes a special appropriations bill and there's consensus about the bill even before it comes to Parliament. This is very unusual. Hopefully it's a foretaste of what's to come. But I suspect, given the give and take that NEDLAC's obliged to process, this may not always happen. The next thing is, obviously, Chairperson, I think all of us, well, I can't speak for everybody, but I think most of us, certainly, seems to me all of us, support the extension of the SRD, never mind the huge difficulties around the economic and financial situation of the country. But we're far worse if we don't offer this grant precisely because of the economic and financial crisis. So as we said last week, or was it on Tuesday, in our select committee meeting, when we got a briefing, it's a trade-off, and it makes sense to most of us that we do offer an SRD grant, bearing in mind, though, that we are in a very, very parlous state, economically and financially. Now, obviously, in our report to the House, our respective reports, we will raise our reiteration, if you like, presumably, of the SRD grant being extended on the post office matter, even in a middle, like let's say emerging metro type situation like, Msunduzi. I mean, even here in the more urban areas, can you imagine what it's like in the more remote areas? I mean, the post office has got incredibly long queues, really, incredibly long. And I really think this is a matter that needs to be raised also with the Communications Committee, because it's not as if, there's any end in sight. I mean, the further burden posed on them with all these grants. So on the one hand, we say, yes, let the state deliver. Yes, let the post office be revitalized through these processes. But on the other hand, it's the poor out there that are the victims of the inefficiencies of us as government, parliament, the state, and the post office in particular. So again, it's a trade-off, Comrade Chair. I feel we should combine the post office with, until the post office strength also develops. All I'm saying is that it's a strange thing that we care for the poor and disadvantaged. We want to issue these grants. And at the same time, we also want a state-led path to recovery and growth and development. So I don't know how you manage all this, but the sense I have, Chairperson, even reading in the media and then in the WhatsApp groups millions of WhatsApp groups that all of us are in, especially since COVID broke out, and in the media, online media and so on, that we're all keenly looking at, especially now with the elections coming up. I mean, the post office is closing down. You meet people actually at the local Pick and Pay and so on, and they accost you, people who worked in the post office before, like one case I had about 3 weeks ago. This man used to work in the post office, and he was communicating what post office workers are saying. On the odd occasion, I have a friend of my sister's, also works in the post office, and he's been despairing. So this is an ongoing situation. There's a cluster of post office workers that I engaged with about 10, 15 years ago over issues around their labor problems. And so some of them now and then WhatsApp or SMS me, not now recently, but they've been doing it for like the last 5, 6 years. They don't get paid and so on at times, and the services are cut down, and they feel very bad, those who are more community spirited, how bad their services are and how upset people get with them that they're not able to deliver more and faster. So it's really bad, Chairperson, the post office. And there's no easy answer. And because we want the post office to function, it's so crucial, as Tipu said. I think this matter should be discussed more with the Communications Committee. Maybe some stage a joint meeting between our two committees. The four committees. We don't have to have separate meetings about this. I know the DA, when it suits them, has problems with those things. And when it doesn't, let's not enter that terrain, but I can't resist saying it, looking at what's happening right now. In this very meeting. All I'm saying, Chairperson, is that the four committees, really, NCOP and NAA, that deal with appropriations and communications and digital technologies, need to look at this issue, Chairperson. It's dire. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other oral member? Babalo?
No, Chairperson, no member has raised their hand.
Okay. Let me also take a bite. Again, thank you, Kosat, for the presentation and the general support of the bill. Although we must still decide on it, but it's very clear that the objective of the bill to try and assist with the after effects of the July unrest and again the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. My first question is you touched on the credit guarantee scheme, and it's one thing that we have always spoken about. Why is it important, and why is it relevant to the discussion that we are having? Is that we are saying it's very critical that the economy should start growing so that it can provide the much needed jobs, and then we take more people out of the social grant as an environment so that they also become productive and get into the economy. So the fact that percent of the credit guarantee scheme was dispersed, it has got an impact on the economy and ultimately in job creation. So I just want to check to say, you say this matter has been discussed at NEDLAC. Do you want and understand exactly what the bottlenecks were and what are the intended solutions? Question number 2, you are saying that after 2 months, the employment relief scheme by been paid. Again, I imagine that you'd have interacted with the Department of Labor again at NEDLAC. What are the problems? Because we think now it's been there for at least a year. People would have had some experience and get with those challenges which they experience. So what's the problem now? My question number 3, what I call I've always said that we know for a fact that there are private companies who have claimed on behalf of the workers, but that money never reached it, and say, I don't hear the voice of COSATU condemning that and calling for those companies to face the might of the law, because it's fraud, it's nothing else. What is the problem? Is it a justified reason? I would like to hear you. Now, Honorable Eunice has just spoken about the long queues, and I think Honorable Peters, same thing at the post offices. Why do we have long queues? That's number 1. But 2, honorable members, those of us who are, we had SASA making a presentation to us, and they tell us that they've got a lot of intermediaries that they are using to disperse grants. Now, the question is, with all these long queues which are becoming permanent, do we understand what is the cause of that despite the using of intermediaries? I may be having my problems about the using of intermediaries, because you remember that when the payment of grants was moved away from the private company to the post office, the main argument was to try and build capacity in the post office. And I know in many fora that I was in, the post office
Chair, I think you better switch off your video.
But am I? Honorable members, can you hear me? Is it Kaiso or is it me saying a problem?
It's Kaiso. I'm saying you better switch off the video.
I switched it off, but I was checking with the other honorable members whether they can hear me.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now, Chair.
Thank you. No, I was on the question of the long queues at the post office, and our office of the week were and SASA, and they told us that they are also using intermediaries. So the question is, with the intermediaries, why do we still get these problems? I was saying I do have my own issues about the usage of intermediaries.
Ulahlekile futhi.
Hello, Honorable Peters.
Yes, we hear.
Okay, I was saying when we moved away from the payment of grants, offices were saying they are ready. To add, a lot of people are still about the quality of getting from understanding of the problem. Let me just pick up my feet. Now, another big problem,
Chair, with respect, we need to find an alternative to continue, please.
On that money, I want to hear COSATU. How do you propose that we deal with that from our side? Related to that is the failure of departments to pay their service providers on time. Again, I don't need to say what the impact of that is. We know it. Lastly, COSATU, we are proposing that the SRD goes beyond March 2022. I just want, and again, that it be increased to about 600. So I'm saying, have you looked at the implication to the fiscals of that? Have you made your calculations, and what is your argument? I think that would be my last question. Comrade Metu, can you please respond? Metu, you are there?
Okay. Yes, I'm here, Comrade Chair. Yes, no, thanks, Comrade Chair. Yeah, thanks to honorable members for the questions. I think it's quite positive, Chair, that we are basically, irrespective of party, the color of our party t-shirts, we're basically all saying the same thing. I think even Honorable Ryder, mostly. So I think, Comrade Chair, it's let me just.
Are you not worried about that?
I was glad, Comrade Chair, when Honorable Ryder said he doesn't agree with everything about COSATU, because I was worried if he said he agrees with everything that the member of the Politburo of the Vanguard Party, Honorable Karim, might report me to my bosses and I'll be in trouble. So it's always good when the DA boxes us now and then. I think, Chair, to Honorable Mlanzana, in terms of the conditions for the financial support for companies, my understanding is that there's a few conditions. The idea is not to make it too many, too burdensome, because the objective is to keep these companies open, they're on their knees, and to help them to save jobs, etc., to regrow. But I think some of the basic conditions put in place to prevent corruption and fraud, etc., is a requirement to have a police case reference number. So you've lodged a case to the police. If you have insurance, to provide a copy of your insurance claim. But that was not a necessity, because you're, for example, your informal traders and many small SMEs wouldn't have insurance. I think there is a commitment to reopen, and of course they must apply. There is inspections being undertaken by the Department of Trade and Industry, by the Industrial Development Corporation, by the Department of Labor as well, to companies to make sure that yes, indeed, they were affected by the violence to some degree. We have raised concerns about that the inspections mustn't delay payments getting to companies timeously, given the capacity constraints of government. So that is one thing we are worried about. But we do appreciate the need to prevent corruption, which is always an ever-present threat. Chair, in terms of informal traders, I mean, Honorable Peters is right. I mean, informal traders are not members of unions, but what we understand from the engagement we have had, that, well, informal traders, SMEs are not insured largely, so hence the fiscal relief does come into play. I know there is some fiscal relief being provided for them from a national level. I know there are some municipalities, and I suspect members from KZN, like the two chairpersons, would know better than me, but I know that eThekwini municipality, and I think a few others have provided some relief to some of them. But of course, also informal traders would be able to apply to SASSA for the food parcels. My understanding is so far the food parcels that were distributed was about 700,000 in KZN, if I'm right, and I think about 200,000 in Gauteng. It could be more than that, but that is the last report we had received. But I know there's lots of engagement also about informal traders trying to get a more supportive relationship with some of the municipalities, and often that's been a very toxic relationship. There is a need to regularize it and make it a more healthy relationship. Honorable Ryder, in terms of the Defence Force and the police, I mean, look, we appreciate the government has always needed to balance what we spend on security, what we spend on growing the economy, helping the poor, etc. But I think what we've seen right now, this last few months, is how weakened the police has become in the Defence Force. We've seen it over some time. The Defence Force has really been a horror story in many regards. The conditions at military hospital 1 and 2 and 3 have really deteriorated. The quality of the bases which public works is meant to maintain have really plummeted. Many of the bases across the country, the fences have been completely removed, destroyed. This has an impact upon the psychological well-being of the Defence Force members. How should they be motivated with a high morale if they're living in squalor conditions? The conditions at the Oudtshoorn infantry training base, where toilets don't even work. They couldn't even isolate personnel who had COVID-19 from other personnel. Members are sleeping in tents in the middle of winter, etc. You have reports of Air Force pilots not even receiving half of the amount of flying hours they should receive a year. Yet the Defence Force has a critical role to play in South Africa and in the continent, and we are systematically collapsing it, if I can be a little bit honest. And though it will take time to rebuild. I think to Honourable Peters, I just want to appreciate Honourable Peters' comments, to welcome them. The issue Honourable Peters raised about COSATU's pension fund proposals, we had raised it in May last year. We had raised it publicly. We had engaged quite a bit with our unions, etc., who actually tabled it to us. It's a difficult balancing act, Chair, because we must also manage expectations of workers. When the previous Minister of Finance, Comrade Mboweni, announced in October the medium-term budget statement that it's going to happen, the pension fund withdrawal proposal. When he re-announced it just before he left cabinet a month ago, workers were phoning us left, right, and center. When can they go and cash out? Can they go to the ATM on Saturday? So we have to manage that because, as you would know, legislative processes, and this requires an amendment of the Act, the 2 Acts, doesn't happen overnight. If we're lucky, it can happen by next year. So it is a juggling act because we also have to go publicly to inform workers of what we're trying to do to assist, and because they're in a very desperate situation, as Honourable Peters highlighted. to also maintain pressure as COSATU upon government and treasury, but we also need to manage expectations of workers that this is not going to happen tomorrow, etc. But I must say, Comrade Chair, last week we really struggled to see eye to eye with Treasury. But I think in the past, 2-3 months, we managed to find each other. We had a very positive meeting with the Minister of Finance about a week ago on it. And there is a commitment that they'll get a bill with the medium-term budget statement in November for relief, which I think could come into effect next year when the bill is passed by. Then there'll be a longer term, a twin pot regime, where then in future, a third of your pension would go to a savings pot, which you could access when you're in need. And you can choose what is your need. Are you indebted? Is it a medical emergency? School fees, whatever the story might be. And then the other 2/3 would go into a preservation pot, which should be preserved for retirement, and upon which you can only access in emergencies, like if you lose your job, for example. We think having the savings 1/3 pot could actually help to incentivize savings, to grow it, because you would know that you can access it when you need it. So, and at the same time, we can help to boost the savings. We have to find the right balance, Honourable Chair, because workers are highly indebted, even public servants, and they also need to be assisted. Even if you're lucky to have your job, like you're a teacher, you may be having a spouse who lost their job, you may be having relatives who have lost wages, and you're supporting an extended network of unemployed relatives. So the pressure is even greater upon you. We do think public servants need to be included in it, even though, yes, they have the wages, but public servants too are highly indebted and need to be assistance. Chair, it's also critical that we give some sort of compromise, the right balance, because right now you can access your pension by simply resigning from your job, and then you can cash out everything, which is the worst of two situations, because then you would be unemployed, you will struggle to find another job, and you would have also depleted your pension fund. So I think for us, we're keen to have a 1/3, 2/3 kind of ratio to give meaningful relief, but also not to deplete pension funds. And, there's a difficulty that only about 6% of workers can afford to retire, as Honourable Karim would know from the previous pension funds discussion we had some years ago at Parliament. So we have to find the right balance. Chair, in terms of the issue around the Presidential Employment Programme, the teaching assistants, we've received very positive feedback on it from SADTU, the teachers' unions. I know there have been instances, I think in the Eastern Cape especially, where some teachers have not been paid, and I think SADTU and them are trying to sort it out. But the report we've received, that it's a more positive one, because you're getting practical skills and experience, you're building confidence, this will help you to find jobs. Some of them are already beginning to be employed in the department. We think because it's hosted by the department, there's a proper structure, it's less prone to corruption as compared to the public works programs. Also, the fact that it's paying at least at the minimum wage level, you help to avoid the cheap labor distractions. We think, Chair, there's a space to expand it. At 11 billion rand has helped to create about 318,000 teaching assistant jobs posts. We hope we could triple it at a cost of about 33 billion rand, and that could help to create about 900,000 jobs. We think the space to look at, can we also host it in the Department of Health, in the police, in Home Affairs, the critical frontline service delivery departments, but even other ones which are involved in the economy, like agriculture, environmental affairs, water affairs, etc. And I think, Chair, it's a worthwhile investment as compared to the cost of violence, which we've seen. Chair, I think on the issue which quite a few members raised about the post office, the Honourable Karim is right. The post office is a horror story. Sitting without getting paid, branches are closing left, right, and centre. It's clear that the existing model of the post office is dying. You need a new model to it. I'm sure no member here has posted a letter this year, maybe even for years. So that model is dead. So what is the new model for the post office? I think one is to link it to the post bank, to become a bank which services pensioners, people in rural areas, people in informal areas, the poor. And so there needs to be a very close partnership with the post bank. But I think, Commissioner, also that you could have it being a multi-purpose government center, so that people could apply for social grants, for the identity documents, they could register with SARS, with the UIF, etc. at it, because the post office does have a huge footprint, especially in rural areas, in townships, where you find that the banks don't exist. You will not find an ATM in an informal area. You will not find an ATM in most villages, in rural areas. People might have to travel in rural areas for 50 kilometers spend a huge amount of money just to go to the ATM. So I think there is a space in that regard. But SASSA also has to get its act together, Chair. To Honorable Kaiso, my former chairperson of the Free State, I mean, I think he's written the fundamental question about how do we grow the economy, because all of these measures are temporary measures to stabilize the ship. I think one is about rebuilding the state, recapacitating it. So you need to deal with the holes in the state, the corruption, the wasteful expenditure, which is bleeding the state on so many fronts. It's about getting the state-owned enterprises back on the feet. We hope the Presidential SOE Council will provide some clear turnaround plans quite soon, and we're pleased that COSATU is part of it. It's about getting ESCOM back on its feet, and I think there is some green shoots we've seen in ESCOM recently about tackling corruption, wasteful expenditure, investing in maintenance, etc. But of course, Commissioner, we also need to fix Transnet Freight and the Ports Authority, because if we can't fix those, then we cannot export our mining or agricultural manufacturing goods. We have to fix PRASA as well to get workers on time to work. Of course, I think on the SARS front, there is good progress, beginning to tackle some of the tax evasion. I think much more needs to be done to capacitate it to deal with customs evasion. But I think it's quite positive that an additional allocation of funding to SARS is given for 500 staff to help recapacitate SARS. Other issues, Committee Chair, is about the other kind of components of the economic recovery plan, about how do we ramp up local procurement from the state to the big companies to consumers to unions. And that is the quickest way to save jobs. There is some work taking place around can we get the construction industry to champion locally produced cement. Let's not import it from Vietnam, even though it is a socialist country. Can unions make sure that we purchase locally produced T-shirts, furniture, cars? I'm sure honorable members would also want to champion, like the president does, and only wear locally produced suits, etc. Chair, I think it is about mobilizing financial stimulus into the economy as well. We have raised with Treasury and they're committed to finalizing it soon, amending Regulation 28 to allow pension funds to invest in infrastructure opportunities, to see what else can we tap into. But I think, Chair, the Minister of Finance, Comrade Madiba, raised a valuable point about overhauling the skills development regime, because the existing one of the CETAs isn't working. It's not producing the skills the economy and workers need. Comrade Chair, just Honorable Kaiso raised the issue about SAPS, and I think a few points. One is that we need to stop the reduction of SAPS personnel. The 7,000 decline, possibly 15,000 in the near future, is going to really hit it hard. But SAPS also has a heavily bloated management structure. You have about 56,000 SAPS members deployed to the provincial head offices. You have about 120,000 deployed to desk jobs. We need to reverse that and have them redeployed to community policing, to stations, etc. There is a need to overhaul the training, because many of the levels of training are very, very poor. There is a need to deal with issues of corruption and pay. You have police officers actually earn amongst the least in the public service, and it is a huge problem. So there's a problem around crime intelligence, that they don't have a head of crime intelligence. I think the previous head, General Peter Jacobs, was doing a good job to begin to clean it up, but there's been a constant internal struggle within the crime intelligence, I think partly linked to the issues of corruption, and that needs to be addressed. But of course, the police can only do so much. They can, but the real solution also is about, can we reduce our 44% unemployment rate? Can we reduce poverty levels? We need to further capacitate the National Prosecuting Authority in the courts, because their record, to be honest, is quite dismal. But I think, Chair, we must welcome the leadership shown by the President and by the ANC recently around trying to clean up corruption, implementing the step-aside resolutions. It's symbolic, yes, but it is an important symbolic effort by government and the ANC to begin to cleanse corruption. Chair, in terms of DTI, DTI has a very small budget in the broader scheme of things. Out of 1.6 trillion rand, they get about 10 billion rand. It's tiny, but the impact is quite significant. We think it's worthwhile to invest in DTI, especially around industrial financing. We've got very positive reports from the clothing factories about the good impact it's having there. There is some work taking place on the 15 industrial sectoral master plans. Some are making good progress, and there's agreements between business, labor, and government, like in the poultry, sugar, clothing and textiles, agricultural master plans. you are seeing some green shoots there. For example, the local retailers have agreed to up their local procurement of clothing from 40% to 60% in the next 3 years. That'll save jobs, create jobs. Others need some more intervention, which we're trying to push as COSATU. Others are sitting in, they haven't even gotten out of the drawing pad, like the health, the construction, the mining master plans, which are obviously key growth opportunities. I think there is good work being done by ITAC to try to protect local industries, but I think we need to also invest more and make sure the industries are competitive, because tariffs is not a long-term solution. Chair, I think Honorable Kaiso raised an important issue which we also came across as COSATU about what about other promises which are affected by the violence. We have seen that in the Free State, for example, in the clothing industry, that some of those factories in the Free State, in the Harry Smith, Putiti Chaba area, etc., have been affected by supplies being delayed from KZN because the supplies were destroyed there. We are having engagement with the UF to see what could be done to assist there under the KZN violence relief thing. But there is existing relief measures in the UF under the reduced time package, where a company which is experiencing distress can apply for the reduced time relief. It assists with paying the workers' salaries. It doesn't tap into the workers' credit cycle, and there must be a financial turnaround plan as well to assist that company. I think, Honorable Njadu, in terms of the impact on this bill, well, this is why we support the bill, because it will have a positive impact on the unemployed through the COVID grant, upon workers, upon companies, etc., through the industrial financing, and hence we strongly support it. Honorable Kaiso raised a soft, sensitive issue about the wage bill. So the 2020 wage bill is before the Constitutional Court. The arguments were heard late August. I'm not sure when will the court judgment be given, but I expect in the near future. The 2021 wage agreement was signed. The majority of unions, about 61% of unions membership signed it in COSATU and FEDUSA. Some unions didn't agree to it. And look, that happens. Not all, you don't always find all unions agreeing to it, but it has come into effect and it's being rolled out. I think the only one which was delayed was the police service, but that's being paid, I believe, today. Hopefully the next engagements around 2022 would draw lessons from the past 2 years to see how can we find each other. And we've raised strongly with the ANC leadership and government the need to respect collective bargaining and see how can we find each other in a win-win way as government, as workers. I must say, Chair, on a positive note, I saw that yesterday that the municipal wage agreement has been signed. And so that's been a very positive resolution of that issue. It's a 3-year wage agreement, which I think addresses all parties' concerns, both workers and government. Chair, just getting towards the end, to the two chairpersons, to comment, Honorable Karim. I think, Honorable Karim, we were very pleased, to be honest with you, that we found consensus very quickly around our disaster relief proposals at NEDLAC with government. We tabled it at NEDLAC on the, I think it was the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and before the meeting ended, we had already found agreement with Treasury. I think Treasury was very responsive to it. I think the Presidency was very supportive of it. And I think it helped that all of us tried to be pragmatic to find common sense solutions which are practical, which government could afford, which could have an impact. And I think we really appreciated it. And I think it's important when we have such crises that all of us work together. We can fight each other on other days. I think, Honorable Chair, I think you also raised both chairpersons about the SRD. We think it is affordable. The cost now in the extension is about 26 billion rand. So for a year, it can be 50 billion rand. We think that is affordable. It's a lot of money, but it is affordable in a budget of about 1.7 trillion rand. I think if we compare that to the cost of the violence we've seen to the economy of about a potential 150 billion rand, this is a much smaller price tag. Not that you have to link or be blackmailed, but I think also the money is not lost. You spend 26 billion rand in the economy, you'll get back easily 15% from VAT because people will spend it on food, on transport, on electricity, etc. It's money that's spent into the economy. It's not money which is saved or stored. But I think we've also seen that it's helped many workers, unemployed people to buy food, to feed their families, also to spend money to buy transport, to pay for transport to go and find work. So there is a positive spin-off. So Commissioner, we're confident the bill will assist with impact on the violence. I think on the loan guarantee scheme, Honorable Chair, we had raised it many times. I know we had raised it with the committees, and I know this committee and the finance committees, the small business development committees that also try to assist in resolving issues. I think we were disappointed that government and the banks didn't really move with speed to resolve it last year. We had high hopes for it. We felt the conditions attached by the banks, though of course they blamed Treasury and Reserve Bank, were too stringent. We did appreciate that many companies were fearful of taking on more debt, not sure about their return to profits, etc. But we thought there were creative ways you could have addressed it. We could have looked at the issue of equity options or grant options that in exchange for saving jobs or creating new jobs, we could convert part of your loan into a grant or into equity. I think it's better to spend a bit of money and not to get it paid back in exchange for saving companies, for saving jobs. And then those workers and companies would then pay taxes and it would come back to the state indirectly. Chair, we think that there's a need to provide lower interest rates and even to give deferred payments for 2-3 years. There was ironically significant support from some investors and from the presidency around this as well. But nonetheless, it hasn't continued. But what we were assured by the banks, and we take what the colleagues in banks tell us sometimes with a pinch of salt, but let's hope they will deliver. They have assured us, the banking associations, they are working on a new model, which they would hope to unveil. Hopefully that can assist, that it can find the right balance. But I think, Chair, last on that point is that if you look at the United States and Europe, they were much more aggressive than us, much more radical at times, to say to a company, we'll give you money, you don't need to pay it back, just to save jobs. And I think it's a worthwhile investment to spend 10 billion rand to save thousands of companies and thousands of jobs, as opposed to deal with the consequence of a 44% unemployment rate, companies closing, having more people needing to be assisted through social grants, etc., etc. Lastly, Commissioner, to your questions around the UIF, it's a very painful experience. I think to the UF's credit, last year the UF was the biggest source of stimulus into the economy. They paid for over 53 billion rand to over 5.5 million workers. At the peak last year, they were paying 700 million rand every single day. So they managed to move mountains to save workers. This year, Chairperson, they have not paid anything since March, nothing for the level 4 period, level 3 period, and even for this violence, nothing. And what we're getting from the UF colleagues is that they become paralyzed by fear of Auditor General findings, because a lot of them were found wanting last year by the AG. Some are put in suspension for 8 months. So now we have the perverse situation where they are simply paralyzed and they're refusing to move an inch. What we find is that each week they add a new bureaucratic requirement for companies applying for relief for the workers. They now want to inspect the companies. They want to get a certificate from DTIC. They want to get this, they want to get that. We meet with them every week, and each week is a further additional delay. We are hoping to meet with the Minister and the DG and the Commissioner to see what can be done to resolve it. But at this rate, we've put aside 5.3 billion rand for the UF for this current period of level 4, level 3, and the violence. We ended up not spending any of it, and that's a huge disadvantage. And what we saw also, Chair, just to get into the end, when the UF really stopped around March this year, we saw increasing levels of retrenchments. So there is a link where the UF has managed to help save jobs, but if we don't fix it, it will worsen the situation. We have tried to address the issue of corruption, Chair, where you raise that employers sat on the money, deducted the money, or didn't pay the money. Hence, what's meant to happen now is that the money is meant to go straight to the worker's bank account, and only in exceptional circumstances where workers don't have a bank account will the money go to the employer, and the employer would be required to provide proof of payment to the worker. There's been about 3.5 billion rand recovered where the employer didn't pay it, or there was fraud or corruption, etc. Chair, right now we've seen a significant decrease in applications to the UIF. For the violence, it's about 8,000 applications were received. For level 4, I think it was about 11,000 or so. That's a huge decrease. I think largely it's because employers are just exhausted with the chaos in the UIF. I think the UIF has become its worst brand ambassador, and that's having a huge impact upon people willingly applying to it. which is it's a real shame because many companies, restaurants, liquor, tourism, hospitality, clothing factories are desperate for it. Commissioner, just getting to the very end, I think the point you raised about SARS and the private companies, I think you're right. There was profiteering there, I think some corruption, and those companies failed to deliver the capacity that was promised to SARSA. We should be looking at enhancing the state capacity through the Post Bank, etc., to do it, or even to utilize the African Bank as a potential state bank where government is a majority shareholder. I must say, Commissioner, that the UF colleagues have also been found wanting. They had assured us last year the UF systems are linked to the banks, to SARS, to Pericel, to all the other government systems. And what we found was that it's not true, that the systems are archaic, they're very backward, and they need a significant overhauling. I think, Commissioner, maybe the other question you raised about the impact of the failure to pay service providers is huge. We met with Treasury this week, and they'd like to try to resolve it. I think they are making progress on a macro level in national provincial departments. I think more work needs to be done on a municipal and SOE level, where they have managed to decrease the levels, but still, there was a case, I think today, of one department which hasn't paid the company for 3 years. In the meantime, the owners of that company have died. Those were workers who were long retrenched, never received the wages due to them, and it destroys these companies who have legitimately provided the services they were hired to do so. So, Commissioner, I think there was one question you had mentioned which I didn't catch because of the break in the connection. So my apologies for that, but I hope I've answered the questions and apologize for taking so long, Comrade Chair. Thanks very much, members.
No, it's fine. The platform it's yours. Let me just check with the oral members. Any burning question that would like to raise with COSATU? Okay. Comrade Matthew, I had asked that in your presentation, you are arguing for the extension of the SRD grant beyond March 2022. You are also arguing that that should be raised to above 600 Rand. So the question that I asked was, have you looked at the implication of that? Have you done some accounting for it and see its impact on the fiscus, especially the debt levels of the country? I'd like to hear you on that one. Perhaps let me just add a new one which was not there at the beginning. I think we all bemoan the status of the barracks, for instance, of SNDF. We think that our soldiers should be living in conditions which are very much conducive for people who are defending the country. But one of the things which comes from many departments, it's the question of public works having to do that work. For instance, from where I am, I don't understand why the barracks of the soldiers should be maintained by civilians, for starters. Shouldn't we start by, for instance, moving the budget of maintenance away from the public works to the department? Here, let's start with the SNDF as a start. But for me, when it comes to facilities management, I think it's quite odd. I think it's a system that we inherited and we have always run with it. But for me, where I'm seated, I would like to hear you. I think the department should be responsible for their own facilities management, and the members of parliament will also know the complaint which always come with the state of parliamentary villages. Perhaps I would even like to hear even the honorable members what they say about this. Why doesn't especially when it comes to the facilities management budget, why can't the departments themselves run those things? If you look at the wasteful and fruitless expenditure, it also emanates from there, where you'll hear a department saying, no, that money was not paid, and therefore there was an interest which was charged, which becomes a wasteful and fruitless expenditure. So I just want to check what exactly is the logic behind that, and I would like to hear what COSATU would be saying. But I think it's more about the challenge to the honorable members who are on the platform again. Can I hear you, Comrade Mate, on that one, on those two?
No, sure. Thanks very much.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, please come in, Honorable.
Sorry, Comrade Matthew. You just with your first question, which relates to the escalation of the social relief of disgrace. Comrade Matthew, as a follow-up to person's question, aren't you then as COSATU seeing yourselves as gradually drawing us into formalization of the unemployment grant, bringing the
we lost Honorable Mlenzana, but I think you heard the gist of it.
You lost me, Chairperson.
Yes, please just repeat. Just repeat.
Yeah, Chairperson.
Yes.
I will be now. Simply, that you're not bringing in the unemployment grant through the back door when they are talking of escalation of the SRT.
Thank you. I think with you hear that. Okay. Let's go back to you.
Okay. No, thanks very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Mlenzana. Yeah, Chair, maybe in terms of the Defence Force, I mean, I think the logic of the Department of Public Works was meant to be that it was meant to be the state, what do you call it, property manager to effect costs of savings, landlord, etc. But what we've seen, Comrade Chair, is that it's a cesspool of corruption for many years on all levels, from rental to maintenance contracts, etc. And I think you've seen many departments have suffered as a consequence. And I think all of them, if they give them a choice, will run for the hills away from Public Works Department because it's not doing what it's meant to do. Department of Home Affairs had to partly develop the Border Management Authority to remove the role of Public Works because they couldn't trust Public Works or CETA, the State Information Technology Agency, to provide the quality facilities or IT support to our border posts. And the border posts can't afford to go offline or to deteriorate. I think you've seen many times at Home Affairs offices, the conditions of the buildings because Public Works is not maintaining them, neither CETA. I got a complaint from a police officer in Limpopo where the police station burned down more than a year ago, and the officers there are still sitting in a burnt out facilities a year later because Public Works is nowhere to be found. I think even at the schools, we have countless amount of schools which don't have decent sanitation or have no sanitation at all. So really Public Works has been found wanting. I think, Comrade Chair, you're right to mention the issue of the 3 parliamentary villages, because you could never understand the amount of money spent on maintenance there for what the quality you see doesn't speak to each other. The contracts there are huge. And to be honest, if I can be very out of order, I would suspect there's a significant amount of padding in some of those contracts, to be honest. And you don't even get quality in exchange. There's corruption and poor quality. So I think, Chair, you would have a valid point to say that maybe the Defence Force, police, other critical departments, we should think about it and ask, would they not be better off? I suspect you will be right, Chairperson, the Defence Force will be far better placed in terms of the in-house skills they already have to maintain their own facilities. I think it could even be a useful discussion. Remember how the Defence Force always had a program to, as personnel prepared to exit the Defence Force, to upskill them with skills they could use in the private sector. That this could also be a useful tool. Defence Force personnel are highly passionate, willing to work, skilled and disciplined. I think it'll make sense, Honourable Chair, to be honest with you. Sorry to be a bit of a pessimist, but I see no end in sight for cleaning up public works. It really has become a lifelong disaster for government in many fronts. I think you do have a valid point, Chair, and I know most departments would agree with you. They said they would love to be liberated from Public Works Department and from CETA as well. Chair, I think to both your question and Honourable Mlemzana about the SRD, I mean, we must appreciate the fiscal constraints facing the state. We're not a society which can print money. We can't afford to have an inflation rate of 1,000% like in some countries. We must look at the debt and deficit trajectory, which is very worrying. Albeit the deficit level is a bit reduced now because of the readjustment of the size of the economy, so that gives us some small breathing space on the deficit level, but still the debt level itself remains there. And I think, Chair, as COSATU, we can never want to see government going to the IMF or the World Bank, because that will mean a real austerity budget. It will mean a devastation of the public services, of pensions, of social services, the whole social wage group, which has been a huge achievement since '94. But I think, Chair, so we must be prudent, but I think, Chair, there is sufficient space for the extension of the 350 grant. It's been quite affordable. I think to retain it beyond April next year, you'll be looking at an amount of about 50 billion rand, give or take. That's affordable on a budget of 1.6 trillion rand, 1.7 trillion rand. You would have to obviously to do some significant reprioritization within the state budgets. That would mean some pain to some departments where you would have to cut a bit. But it'll be worthwhile, Chair. It's a valuable investment in helping the poorest of the poor. And I think, Chair, for us, we've all talked about some sort of a basic income grant. We think this is a stepping stone, a realistic stepping stone towards it, an affordable one. Obviously, you can't come with a basic income grant of 7,500 rand. There's just no money for it. But the 350, and if you can link it gradually, even if you must phase it in over 1 or 2 or 3 years to the 624, it's affordable, Chair. But it's an investment in the economy and into people, but you'll have to reprioritize. We do have a little bit of breathing space, I think, Chair, on 2 fronts. The one is the commodities boom has helped to generate additional revenue for government. Obviously, that's not a permanent boom, but I think also there is good work being done by the new Commission of SARS to tackle the holes in SARS. And I'm confident that would also ease some breathing space for the state. But of course, Chair, we have to address the other holes in the state, the corruption, the wasteful expenditure, the SOEs. We have to also look at how do we stimulate the economy. But I think, Chair, for us, this is a fair balance between two extremes. You can't afford 44% of the country to be sitting with no income at all. We have to assist them. There's a ticking time bomb. And of course, we have to manage the state finances. So I think for us, extending the 350 grant, beginning to link it to the food poverty line, it's a fair balance, it's a fair compromise, and we should accept the pain that's necessary to achieve it. Of course, whilst addressing the fundamental structural flaws and the challenges facing the state as well, Comrade Chair. But yeah, I think let me stop there, Comrade Chair, and yeah, thanks to the members for the questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, COSATU. I think that was quite a valuable interaction, and thank you for taking time. And as Honorable Peters was saying, that the arguments which are being put forward, one may agree or disagree with them, but there's no doubt that they are very cogent and well researched. I think my parting shot on news is talking about the 350 SRD, 350 Rand SRD, that we should know that this is the money which is going back to the economy. I think that's important. And 2, the president announced that has been made possible by the windfall, as explained from SARS, which came from the performance of the mining sector, and therefore it didn't affect negatively the fiscal framework as it were. But it is an investment into the economy. If you look at what happens, these people are going to be able to go and buy more food, more flour, more bread, and so on. And therefore, people who are producing more bread are producing bread to produce more bread, and those jobs there will be protected, and even creating more other jobs. Again, something will end up with SARS again. So it's not a zero-sum game. There are good positive multiplier effects which come from the introduction of this money into the economy. The whole second special appropriation bill intervention will also help to put money into the economy, so that all around we can talk about all those benefits. But thank you very much. You may remain. We'll continue with our agenda. Any announcements coming from you, Lubabalo?
No, there are no agenda announcements, Chairperson, from our side, except that we'll wait then for the standing committee to finalize the process and NA, and then thereafter we'll adopt our report, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We will continue communicating with the members as we normally do, Chair.
Thank you so much. Darren, anything from you?
Chairperson, we are going to draft the report over the course of the weekend. Members will definitely do it by Monday. And then our next meeting is on Tuesday, also at 3 o'clock. We will be considering and adopting the report on the bill. Thank you.
Honorable Wright, I see your hand. Is it an old hand or a new hand?
No, Chair, it's a new hand. It just relates to, I did note that there was a written submission that was sent in as well, although the gentleman hasn't presented himself to the committee today. But there was a written submission, and I think that it would be improper if we didn't just address it briefly. And I think that, you know, anyone who reads the submission would probably agree with me to say that, you know, we can't really discuss the contents of it because, frankly, it has nothing to do with this particular appropriations bill. And I think that the gentleman perhaps would be better placed by submitting his thoughts to, yeah, I don't know, the Department for Rural Development and Land Reform. It certainly doesn't sit with this bill that we're discussing today. And perhaps a reply could be sent to him indicating that we did receive his inputs, but they were not relevant to the discussions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ryder. Secretaries, you heard that definitely it's a misplaced submission. It has got nothing to do with the bill that we are discussing, but please direct the member of the public to the right place. I think that's.
Thank you. I agree with that.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Darren.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, you were sort of fading. So the Standing Committee on Appropriations is meeting on Tuesday to consider the report. Yeah, after which it will then be taken to the National Assembly. And you heard, Babalo, that they're eagerly waiting for us. So we'll be doing that next week, honorable members. In the absence of any announcements, let me take this opportunity to thank my co-chairperson, Honorable Mahlangu, thank honorable members from both committees, the standing and the select committees on appropriation, our support staff, members of the public on the platform, media. Thank you so much for making yourselves available. and all of the best with the registration weekend. Honorable Mahlangu, anything from your side?
No, Chairperson, I don't have anything. Just happy with the input from and the responses from COSATU so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Honorable members, this brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, bye.
Bye. Austipo.